Alright everyone, today we're going to be talking about the quadratic formula. Specifically, we're going to be talking about its origins and how you can derive it yourself using simple algebra. If you want to learn how to apply the quadratic formula yourself, that's going to be in a separate video linked in the description below. The quadratic formula is a solution to the general form of a parabola as seen here, ax squared plus bx plus c. If you've seen them in your math classes, they probably looked like this or this, and you probably had to find their zeros. You've almost certainly done this by factoring them into binomials, which is sometimes difficult and sometimes impossible, which is where the quadratic formula comes in. This is the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. The first records of somebody conceptualizing the quadratic formula was by Brahmagupta in 628 AD. He described it verbally or in words, so it wasn't quite like the one we know today. It was a lot more like your math professor attempting slam poetry. It was first put into variables and numbers by Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi in about 830 AD, about 200 years after Brahmagupta did. Now we are going to begin getting our own quadratic formula. We're going to start with the general form of a parabola, ax squared plus bx plus c, and we're going to set it equal to 0. Then we're going to have to isolate the x however we can. Now, our next step is going to be to complete the square. So we're going to do that by grouping out all the terms within x, dividing that a. We're going to focus on this term with the x. Now, when you're completing the square, you're trying to get a binomial squared once you factor it. So, in order to do that, your coefficient term has to be the square of half of your x term, the coefficient on your x term. Then we're going to take that BA, multiply it by a half, and square it. So we're going to start processing that. That's going to look like b over 2a, and that's going to look like b squared over 4a squared. We're going to take that, we're going to inject it into the parentheses there, and we also have to add it to the right side of the equation. If we're careful, we'll notice that when we're adding it to those parentheses on the left side, we are automatically multiplying it by an a, the a on the front of those parentheses. So we have to tack an a onto it on the right side in order to make sure that we're adding the same thing to both sides of the equation. Now in this next step, I'm going to cancel a's, and then we're going to take this and we're going to factor it into binomials. So you're going to notice that term from a couple steps ago. That is going to be what we're adding to our x. Next, we are going to move the c over to the right side of the equation. We're going to do that by subtracting c from both sides. Then we are going to divide a out from both sides, canceling the a on the left, and then putting it on the right on the bottom of the two fractions. Then we're going to find the lowest common denominator of those two fractions on the right. We're going to do that by taking our 4a squared and dividing a out. So then we know we need to multiply the top and the bottom of that second fraction by 4a. And that will give us 4ac over 4a squared for the second fraction. So then we have two fractions sharing a denominator separated by a subtraction sign. So then we can just separate the numerators with that subtraction sign and put them over the same denominator up here. Now we are going to eliminate the squared from the left side of the equation. We're going to do that by taking the square root of both sides. And in doing this, since we're eliminating the square on the left side, we have to reflect both potential cases by adding a plus minus on the right side. Now we're going to cancel those squares. And since we have the square root of a fraction on the right side of the equation, that is going to be equal to the square root of the numerator over the square root of the denominator. So that's what we'll do here. Move that down. Now we are going to take this square root of 4a squared and we're going to simplify that, and that is going to become 2a on the bottom of the fraction on the right side of the equation. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move that b over 2a term over to the right side of the equation. Now look what we have here. We have two fractions sharing a denominator separated by that plus minus sign. We did something like this earlier, didn't we? Now what we're going to do is we are going to put them over the same denominator, separating the numerators with that plus minus sign. Now this right here x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a is our quadratic formula. This right here. Know it, remember it, love it. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. It rolls off the tongue beautifully. This is the quadratic formula. I hope you found this video informative. If you would like to suggest a future video, be sure to sound off in the comments below. Thanks for watching.